McLaren are back-to-back Constructors Champions in Formula 1 for the first time in 35 years almost. 1991 was the last time they managed this feat. And although, of course, getting the championship last year in 2024 was really impressive and the first time they'd won it in 26 years at that point, this year has been absolutely crushing for the opposition. They were nowhere near McLaren, so much so that they won it with 6 rounds remaining. They could have won it as early as the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, but they won it in Singapore last time out. So what were the main moments? What were the 5 most important races and moments in this season for McLaren in their absolutely triumphant season? Of course, they've got more points than second place Mercedes and third place Ferrari combined right now in the Constructors. They are absolutely flying, and they're on course to still break some records in the remaining 6 rounds of this season. So with that in mind, here are the most important moments this season for McLaren. So obviously in Australia, even though Lando Norris won the race, it was Oscar Piastri all the way down, I think P8 or P9 at the end, struggling in the wet conditions. That Aussie curse in his home race very much continuing in the form of Oscar Piastri. But the next time out in China, it was a dominant 1-2 victory for them in Shanghai. Although earlier in the weekend, it wasn't looking like that was going to be the case. Of course, Sir Lewis Hamilton winning the sprint race for Ferrari, very much putting the cat amongst the pigeons at that point, throwing doubt as to whether McLaren really were the all-conquering beast to beat this year, but they proved on Sunday, when the big points are paid out, of course, that they are the top team in Formula 1, and that very much set them up for an incredible season in 2025. Much later on in the season at Spain, it was another 1-2 finish for McLaren, but the way that they managed it was absolutely incredible. Most of this season, they haven't been that much faster than the competition in qualifying. In fact, I think at the time of recording after the Singapore Grand Prix, Max Verstappen has more pole positions than Oscar Piastri or Lando Norris. In qualifying over one lap, they've not usually been that quick. However, at the Spanish Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri in particular absolutely wiped the floor with the competition in qualifying 3 tenths ahead of Max Verstappen, who was third, and a good 2 tenths ahead of his teammate Lando Norris. And in the race, they were absolutely untouchable as well. Before the late safety car was called, I'm sure they were about 20 or 30 seconds ahead of the chasing pack. And in the end, Max Verstappen was all the way down in P10 after his penalty for the collision with George Russell. So for me, and I think I said it at the time after that race, Max Verstappen's championship hopes were pretty much over. Now, of course, this is a Constructors' Championship we're celebrating here for McLaren, but having Verstappen out of the picture in the drivers just alleviated some of the pressure on them. Next, let's talk about the British Grand Prix. McLaren's home race, Lando Norris's home race, and it was another 1-2 victory for the team. Of course, we're not going to talk about the controversial incident with Oscar Piastri's penalty. I've already spoke about that at the time, but the reason why I'm highlighting this as our third moment, our third race in this McLaren top 5 list effectively, is because Max Verstappen again got pole position for this one, but still the team won in a dominant fashion. They were absolutely clear of the competition. Max Verstappen was well down the order by the end, eventually recovering to P5, but he was on the edge of the top 10 earlier on in the Grand Prix. Again, it showed even though Verstappen was fastest in qualifying, he couldn't hold it together in the race. Not through any fault of his own, but just because the car wasn't quick enough. Fourth moment, Hungary. Now, another 1-2 for McLaren, but the reason why I'm highlighting this is because this was the 4th 1-2 finish in a row for McLaren before the summer break, which equaled their record of 1-2 finishes in Formula 1 history. Had they done that at the following round as well in the Netherlands, they would have, of course, equaled the all-time record for 1-2 finishes with 5 in a row, but sadly Lando Norris's engine said no to that request. However, before the summer break, again, they were absolutely miles clear of the competition. I think in terms of the overall margin, this is probably the biggest between them and the competition. It was over 20 seconds between them and George Russell by the finish, who was in third. And if it wasn't already known at that point, they were going to win the Constructors' Championship. It was just a matter of time. They could have done so at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, but the final moment I'm going to highlight is the moment where they clinched it at Singapore. It was not the best Grand Prix for them overall. There was a big controversy with the drivers colliding. I've already had my say on that. Check out the video if you've not already, of course. But 3rd and 4th place for them overall was enough for them to clinch the Constructors' Championship with 6 rounds remaining, equaling the all-time record in that regard of Red Bull Racing from a couple of years ago. 6 rounds remaining and still top of the tree, and no one can catch them. Effectively 3/4 of the way through the season, they could just not turn up to the final 6 rounds. They'll still win the championship. They won't win the drivers, of course, at that point, I don't think, but that is all to play for, obviously. But despite that, they were still one of the highest scoring teams from that weekend. Only Mercedes outscored them, of course, with George Russell getting first and Antonelli getting fifth, just a little bit more than McLaren. But it's very rare at any point throughout this season that any team had actually outscored them. That's how relentlessly consistent they've been. And you can criticise their conduct with the drivers all you want, but you can't argue with the results on track in terms of what McLaren as a team have achieved. It's been absolutely incredible. Can they do it again next year in 2026? Well, we'll have to see. They switched off development very early for this car, obviously, in 2026 because they've been so good this year in 2025. So we'll see what happens, guys. I'm excited to see it. I know you are too. And of course, we'll be here to cover the remainder of the season as well. Who is winning the championship? Piastri or Norris? Get your say in the comments below. Like, share, comment, subscribe as always, guys. Have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world today, and we'll see you very soon.